Yeah, you know, 3 years ago we were like in a kind of an empty room, and we were dreaming about how can we create a different university. And now the reality is that with us we have, thanks to US Embassy, the most important entrepreneur for 2013 from Global Entrepreneurship Forum. No? So maybe as we want to spread the virus, for me the challenge is how much we create the most unreasonable team learning and teampreneur community in the world. So we have born with the aim of being present in other countries, and we would like to be in 5 new countries. We want to announce that before 2020, and it would be amazing that maybe having dinner this night with you, Daniel, we can maybe define which would be the path to really make it happen. So welcome, and now you're the protagonist. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the warm introduction, and for everybody in the room for lending me your ears, I guess, for the next 20 minutes or so, and for TEAMLABS for hosting us today, and of course the Consulate for making this possible. So what I'm going to talk about today, I think, is how we solve the grand challenges of our time, and our biased belief at Unreasonable that entrepreneurs are positioned to do that extraordinarily well. But I just want to comment on everything that TEAMLABS is doing here, because I really believe in it. And I love that introduction, wherever Max went, I don't know where he is. It's up way in the back. I love that introduction because I think one of the grand challenges of our time is certainly the future of education, preparing the next generation for the world that they're about to step into. And it's interesting because that's probably the most important place where we can invest, and yet in so many ways we've seen the least amount of innovation. I have a good friend who tells a story. He told me one time we were having dinner, he said, imagine if you had a time machine. I said, okay, this is cool. He goes, you have a time machine, you go back 300 years and you grab a surgeon from an operating room. And then you bring that surgeon back to present day and you put that surgeon into an operating room. Well, that surgeon, will she know how to operate? And the answer is absolutely not. She'll have no idea what these things called computers are. She'll have no idea what the systems are, the tools are. But if you go back 300 years ago and you grab a teacher from a classroom and you throw them into a university today, well, that teacher, will she know what to do? Yes, she'll know exactly what to do, because we have yet to disrupt the system in which creativity should be flourishing out of. So what TEAMLABS is doing is brilliant, because I think that you're rethinking, reimagining the classroom and the educational system in every single level. I just love that. The grand challenge I want to talk about today, though, is how we put a dent on global poverty. I think one of my best friends, can't really read this, so I'll describe it. One of my best friends in the whole world and co-founder of the Unreasonable Institute once showed me this cartoon and said it was representative of how we think about solving seemingly impossible problem sets. And what you have here is you have 2 mathematicians, and on the left, a very complicated problem, and on the right, an elegant solution. And then in the middle, on the chalkboard, it's written, then a miracle occurs. And at the bottom, the mathematician tells his friend, I think you should be more explicit here in step 2. I think that when we look at solving the hardest problems, the seemingly intractable social and environmental problems of our time, we oftentimes do this. We leave it up to miracles. Right? Specifically individuals who live on the fringe of human potential. The Joey Itos, or the Mother Teresas, or the Mahatma Gandhis of our world. And we look to these people, as Max said, far too often as heroes. And we separate ourselves from them and what they have achieved, and we think that only they can create this level of change. Well, today in a world where 1 billion people live in absolute poverty, about 770 million people who don't have access to clean drinking water, 780 million individuals who are completely illiterate, 2/3 of those are women. In a world where we have these types of statistics, leaving our solutions up to miracles, like these mathematicians, is no longer acceptable. We need to start to deconstruct and reconstruct and rethink how we approach solving our hardest problems and how we approach solving those hardest problems. The good news is a lot of people are actually trying to do this. And before we started the Unreasonable Institute, we did some research. We wanted to see what is the world currently doing about solving these really hard problems and how are they trying to demystify them. And that took us to the United Nations and to the UN Millennial Development Goals. So who here is familiar with those? And not actually half of them, that's pretty good. So I'll quickly describe what happened. In 1990, the United Nations came together and they decided that they'd set some goals. And these goals were to be reached by today, 2015. So they had 25 years to reach these goals. And the goals were to solve the hardest problems that were facing the planet and facing humanity collectively. Now, number one on their list, out of their top 10 most important goals for humanity to go after, was to half the number of people living in absolute poverty. Individuals who live, by their definition, on less than $1.25 a day. And what was amazing about this is this was the largest unified ratification that the United Nations had ever had. 189 nations, you can't read that, 189 nations signed this. They had the global infrastructure to pull it off. They had actually trillions of dollars, not billions of dollars, of backing behind reaching this number one goal of half the number of people living in poverty. Even Bono was supporting this, and the question is what happened? Because we're in 2015 now, so it's been 25 years, and we were supposed to hit this goal. And if you zoom in on the area of the world that has the highest concentration of individuals living in absolute poverty, it's decently telling what has happened. What this graph shows is the number of individuals living in absolute poverty in sub-Saharan Africa between 1990 and 2010. In 1990, when the UN set these goals, it was 44.6% of the population was living in absolute poverty. In 2010, it was 44%. So yes, there was a reduction in terms of percentage, but what's actually terrifying about this slide is because of population increase over those 20 years, you have an additional 140 million individuals in sub-Saharan Africa who now live in absolute poverty than did in 1990. And actually today these numbers are even worse. It's about 154 million more people live in poverty after we set the goal as a world, as national powers, to change that. Oh, you can't see that number. That says 140 million. Does anybody know Einstein's definition of insanity? His definition of insanity is when you try to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. I think our paradigm of international development has failed us in a lot of ways. In some ways it has done us service, but in some ways it has really failed us. And so we need to run experiments. We need to figure out how to effectively solve these problems. And for us at Unreasonable Institute specifically, how do we solve problems effectively that are related to endemic poverty? So this is why we launched the Unreasonable Institute. As a small team, kind of a ragtag group of friends. In 2010 we came together, we were all best friends, and we decided we wanted to try to figure out how do we experiment in solving issues related to poverty. We knew that we probably weren't the best people to do this because we're from Boulder, Colorado. And so instead, let's empower individuals who are on the front lines already solving these problems and help scale up their efforts. So what we do is we align with entrepreneurs from all around the world, solving impossibly hard problems. We try to help them scale to meet the needs of at least 1 million individuals each after they graduate from our program. To date, we have worked with we've worked with 172 startups, headquarters of 41 different countries. And they're working on problems related to poverty. So this is everything from how do you reintegrate 50,000 former Liberian child soldiers into society, or how do you prevent honor killing in Pakistan, or what are ultra-affordable DNA diagnostics in Argentina. We've worked with the fastest growing chain of schools on the planet that's actually based out of Kenya. We try to align all these entrepreneurs with an unfair advantage, similar to what I think TEAMLABS does here. We align them with mentors, so we're bringing about 50 mentors when we bring our entrepreneurs together for a program. And our mentors are Facebook, or the co-founders of Facebook, and the founder of WordPress, really amazing entrepreneurs. We'll run workshops that are expert-led. So if we're going to run a week-long workshop on negotiation, we'll bring in the foremost expert in negotiation you can find on the planet, the person who wrote the book Getting Past No and Getting to Yes and led the Harvard negotiation projects. And then we're going to drive capital into our companies and try to leverage what works with financing. So we have about 150 different partners, or different funds, foundations, and investors who then invest into these companies. What's been amazing is this was a huge experiment for us. We didn't know if this would work. We actually still don't know if this is going to work. But something is working. So the average company who goes through the Unreasonable Institute, according to our most recent assessment, within 24 months sees a 9.7x increase in revenue, and sees an over 5x increase in team size. And these are entrepreneurs working in some of the hardest markets on the planet. And so these numbers get us really excited. About 9% of our companies still exist 3 years after going through our program. Half of our companies are led by women, which is very rare for accelerators. We actually think that's why it's so successful in some ways. And a small confession to make is that these numbers are impressive, but we would not take attribution or claim that the reason our entrepreneurs are scaling so quickly is because of Unreasonable. There's definitely an association, but I like to make fun of us at the Unreasonable Institute and say that those who can't do teach, and those who can't do or teach run accelerators. Because what we do is we create the conditions in which entrepreneurs and mentors and investors collide, but we are not the entrepreneurs, the mentors, or the investors in our programs. I think an important thing to talk about is that we realized we needed to pivot 2 years ago, and I want to tell you a little bit about what we've recently done and now where we're going. 2 years ago, we realized that we're actually going to have a chance in hell at putting a dent on global poverty, which is our stated mission. That we need to orient our efforts and those of our entrepreneurs around adolescent girls living in poverty. And we've taken this very seriously. The reason I say this, I think that intuitively and emotionally, we probably resonate with that claim. We get that. We understand the power within a girl and her power and ability to change the world. But it was when we saw the numbers at Unreasonable that we really took this seriously, and that it made it very clear. A number of studies have come out. Research has shown that for families living on less than $2 a day, so families in absolute poverty, those we really want to reach, that if a son in that family is able to receive an education and go to school and go to secondary education, he will, on average, take 30 to 35% of his future earnings and invest it back into his family. Now, if a daughter in that same family is able to get the same educational opportunity, she will, on average, take 90 to 95% of her future earnings and invest it back into her family. So if you actually care about doing what works, you have a 3x leveraged return on poverty alleviation by ensuring that that girl can get educated and have the same chance that the son does in the family. So we took this really seriously, and 2 years ago, we decided to launch a new program. We partnered with the Nike Foundation and a movement called the Girl Effect, and we launched something called the Girl Effect Accelerator. This is the world's first community of entrepreneurs positioned to benefit millions of adolescent girls in poverty. When we set out to launch this 2 years ago, and we met with the Nike Foundation, sat down with their leadership, and we said, okay, we have to do something like this. We know we want to do this, but will it actually work? Can we actually find for-profit entrepreneurs with rapidly scalable models in emerging markets positioned around the hardest to reach demographic on the planet, which is adolescent girls living less than $2 a day? We had no idea. And so we just dove into it as we tend to do, and we spent about a year researching. Ultimately, we did find 10 companies that represent this nexus of explosive growth and impacting girls in poverty. To make this real, I'm going to stop with the theory and get into a couple stories of a couple of the companies that we worked with. We launched our inaugural Girl Effect Accelerator program in November, brought together 10 companies, and I'll tell you about 2 of them now. One of the companies I want to share with you is a business that developed a technology designed around helping mothers save their infants and keep them warm. So this photo, which you can kind of see, is a little infant, and if you saw the infant's facial expression, you would think that this infant was sleeping very well, and that it was peaceful, but in reality, this infant is struggling for its life. And every single breath it takes, it struggles, because this infant is a premature infant. Today, there are about 15 million babies that are born prematurely, and the struggle that they have is that they can't regulate their body temperature. Out of those 15 million babies that are born prematurely every single year, 3 million of them will ultimately die. And they'll die because of hypothermia. Because to them, this room that feels like room temperature to us feels like ice cold water to them. Now the reason these 3 million babies die though, instead of all 15 million, is because typically the vast majority of those 3 million are in emerging markets in rural settings. And in emerging markets and in rural settings, you don't have access to incubators like you do in more developed markets. So this is a typical incubator just at a hospital. This is actually a hospital in Nepal, in Kathmandu, and this incubator costs $20,000. Standard baby incubator costs $20,000. It takes electricity to run it. It's only set up in hospitals. You need a specialist to operate it. This is not set up for a rural village environment where the majority of these premature babies have died. And if you were going to actually design this technology for a rural environment, you have to make it work just as effectively without electricity, without a specialist, without the need for a hospital. And it would have to be not 2 times cheaper, not 5 times cheaper, not 10 times cheaper, but at least 100 times cheaper, but just as effective. We were really privileged at the Girl Effect Accelerator to work with a startup who has somehow miraculously created that technology. They're called Embrace Innovations, and they invented this, which is their version of a baby incubator. It's called the Embrace Warmer. And how it works is it basically looks like a sleeping bag, as you can tell. What it has is a phase-changing material that the mother will boil in just a pot of water and then slips into this pouch in the front. of the sleeping bag, and that phase-changing material holds the perfect temperature for that baby for 8 hours. It takes about 2 minutes to boil again. And so this is actually just as effective as a normal baby incubator. It doesn't take electricity, it doesn't require a hospital, you don't need a specialist. It's 150 times to 200 times cheaper than a standard incubator, and it works. They've actually gotten us out to market. They've helped mothers save the lives of 150,000 infants. And what I love about this company, what I love about Embrace and their entire team, is they are so unsatisfied with that number. If you were to give them a high five and say, you saved 150,000 infant lives, they'd say, yeah, but 3 million still are going to die next year, unless we can get this out to all of them. And so we try to help them scale this company at the Girl Effect Accelerator. The second company I'll tell you about is in a totally different space, and it's the space of education and clean energy. This company is trying to ensure that girls on the continent of Africa, when they go home at night, they can study and they can do so in a safe and clean environment. Because today, this is really what you can't really see, but I'll tell you what it is, what it looks like for the average girl on the African continent. When she goes home and she wants to study, she studies next to one of these things. This light source is a kerosene lantern. And 3 out of 4 girls right now on the African continent don't have access to electricity. Their families don't have access to electricity, to be more accurate. And so instead of an electrical light, they'll light up kerosene. And the girl, when she studies next to this, she'll do so for as long as she can, probably until her eyes start to water, so she starts coughing too much, because studying next to kerosene is like studying next to burning jet fuel 2 feet away from your face. This is the health equivalent of smoking 2 packs of cigarettes every single day, is what this girl and her entire family are breathing in daily because of kerosene. This is a huge problem globally. There are 1.6 billion people who don't have access to electricity on the planet today. To put that into perspective, I was shocked by this number, but that's more people who don't have access to electricity today than when Thomas Edison turned on the very first light bulb. There were only 1.5 billion people on the planet when he did that. So this is a big issue. The good news is there are a lot of innovative startups now that are trying to tackle this. They're replacing kerosene with solar lanterns. And they're doing so at the scale of millions, which is great. It's not enough. The scale's billions, but they're starting to get there. The problem is the benefit of a solar lantern is not doing what we were hoping it would do for girls living in poverty. The theory is that if you replace this kerosene lantern with a solar lantern, then when the girl goes home at night, she'll be able to study for longer hours, she'll do better in school. But in reality, what we've seen in the field is that more commonly, for a family living in poverty who gets one solar lantern, the first people who get access to it at night are the parents, the second in line are the sons, and the last, if she's lucky, is the girl child in the family. And so if you're actually going to solve this problem, if you're going to give the girl equal access to clean light throughout the evening so that she can study, you're going to have to find a way to solar electrify the entire house or the entire hut. Go from kerosene to electrifying the whole house. And we were privileged to work with a company called Off-Grid Electric based out of Tanzania who's actually tackling this problem. Hopefully you can see this. What this is a map. It's just a Google image of Tanzania. And up here you have Mount Kilimanjaro, there you have the border of Kenya. And this is taken in mid-2012 when Off-Grid Electric, as a solar company, launched their business. And what I want to do is show you how quickly they grew as a startup in these markets. These little yellow dots are going to appear across the screen, and each one of those yellow dots is a family where they helped replace kerosene and electrify the house with solar energy. You can start to see it take off. So in the first 2 years as a startup, they ran their pilot in this location of Tanzania, and by the end of 2014, which was last year, they had electrified 25,000 homes, going from kerosene to solar electricity to modern solar electricity at a price that was cheaper than that family was previously paying for kerosene, and ensuring that everybody in the family, including the girl, can have access to clean energy throughout the evening. Of course, the question is, how does this work? Most people don't understand how, because what this graph is showing is number of cell phones per 100 individuals across just a handful of countries that I've polled. This is from the World Bank's database in 2014, and this black dotted line since 1998. This shows individuals in the US who have cell phones. So here, out of every 100 people, 20 had one, so 1 out of 5 individuals. Today in the US, it's about 98 cell phones per 100 people, so a little bit less than 1 cell phone per person. But in countries like Botswana, you have 1.5 cell phones per person. In Vietnam, you actually have 1.7 cell phones per person. In Mali, which is not on this graph, you have 2.2 cell phones per person. These markets have seen unbelievable penetration of mobile phones, and this has opened up the opportunity for companies like Off-Grid to really flourish. So how Off-Grid Electric works is they will go to a house that is using kerosene, right now in rural Tanzania. They'll knock on the front door. Somebody at the house will open the door and they'll say, hey, you're using kerosene right now. Do you want to switch from kerosene to modern solar living? We'll do so at no cost up front and you'll pay less than you're currently paying for kerosene. Everybody says yes, right? Of course they say yes. And the reason this is possible is because families in poverty spend a third of their income on average on dirty fuels like kerosene, which is an incredible amount of their income. And so for a lot of these families, that would mean, let's say, $4 a week. So they spend $4 a week on kerosene. Off-grid says, we'll give you modern solar living for $3.80 every single week. Do you want it? They all say yes. They say, great. They install the solar system. And then each week they send a text message to the house. They send a text message to somebody's phone in the house. And they say it's $3.80. If they pay $3.80, then the solar lights stay on for the next week. If they don't, then the solar lights don't turn on. Basically, they've created a distributed solar utility that's faster growing than any utility we could really imagine in current markets. And this is the type of technology that's going to be really flying across emerging markets into the future because of mobile. So long story short, we brought 10 companies together. 2 of them were Embrace and Off-Grid Electric. We had 8 other companies of equal impact, from the fastest growing mobile banking company on the planet to, as I mentioned, the fastest growing chain of schools in the world. And we came together for 2 weeks to really come together as a community and try to figure out how do we leverage entrepreneurship to meet the needs of adolescent girls in poverty. We ran the program a couple hours north of Silicon Valley, just outside of San Francisco, on a really secluded family-owned farm. It was a cool environment because we had a lot of brilliant innovators stuck together living on this farm. And you can't really see this image, but this is actually a barn in which we ran most of the program, in which we really workshopped. And this is one of our mentors, Seth Godin, who's arguably the most prominent marketer in the world, and he's leading a session with our entrepreneurs. But we also brought out the CFO of Google and the head of sustainable supply chain at Nike and the co-founder of Priceline and the founder of the largest solar company on the planet. We brought out 20 mentors of this caliber. For 2 weeks, we all lived together. These 10 startups, like the 2 I described, these 20 world-renowned business leaders as mentors, and we tried to figure out collectively how can business become a powerful tool to meet the needs of girls and effectively address global endemic poverty. Whoops, just ahead, that's fine. A very good question to be asking is, okay, what now? What happened out of this experience? And there's actually a lot that's come out of the Girl Effect Accelerator, and I could talk about it for hours, but I wouldn't do that. Instead, I'll just tell you one example of something that happened. When we looked at launching the Girl Effect Accelerator, that was 2 years ago when we first started to talk to the Nike Foundation about this, and we had decided then that we were going to launch an investment fund, and it was going to be a small fund focused exclusively on investing in companies like I just mentioned, for-profit companies with wildly scalable models that are positioned around girls in poverty. We are going to call this the aptly dubbed Girl Fund. But what we realized is actually this is totally the wrong posture. To launch a fund that is a sidecar fund focused on investing in companies that benefit girls, it can't be a sidecar fund if we actually want to see the type of change that we want to see in the world. And so at Unreasonable Capital, the only fund that we have, our general fund, is now requiring that 100% of the portfolio companies we invest in track their impact on women and girls in poverty. We don't care what your industry is, we don't care what your geography is. If you accept money from our fund, you have to track your impact on women and girls in poverty because we know this is critical. And we know there's always more we can do, but at the end of the day, we believe that what you measure is an indicator of what you value, and oftentimes what you measure changes behavior over time. So we hope to pull some uncommon insights from this portfolio as we move forward with Unreasonable Capital. That's just a random slide that says our investment thesis, but I'll go to the next one. I'll close just with the general takeaway, and its core value that we have in Unreasonable. I think probably everybody in this room has, and I'm sure TEAMLABS has this value as well. But it's that there's no such thing as they. I remember I was watching the news a couple years ago, and every time you watch the news, it's always depressing. Right? You see all these headlines, and whether it's economic recession, or it's youth unemployment, or it's climate change, or it's war, or it's terrorism, whatever it might be, this is what we always see in the headlines. And I remember sitting there, watching the nightly news one evening, and thinking, God, I wish they would do something about this. Like, why can't they do something about this? And then it struck me. There's no such thing as they. There's only us. We need to stop looking at miracles and miraculous individuals to change the world and then come up with solutions to our hardest problems. And we ourselves need to start doing it. The core value, anyways, okay, that jumped out. So you know what? I'll just stop there. What I was going to show you on the next slide, though, was just my email address. And I'll just give it to you now, because if you want to collaborate that's kind of all we do at Unreasonable. We believe in pathological collaboration and in partnership, and we're interested in having more of a presence here in Spain. So if you want to get in touch, my email is just daniel@unreasonablegroup.com. It's daniel@unreasonablegroup.com. Drop me a line, let's hang out. Hopefully we'll have some beers tonight. I don't know if we have time for Q&A or not. I'll ask over here the moderator direction. Do we have time?
Yes, 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
We have to still, yes, we will still having a dialogue with you.
Yeah.
So if you, whatever you want.
Yeah?
If you feel comfortable, we'll have like 5-10 minutes for questions, but then we will still work on it.
Oh, we'll still go. Okay, so let's just do 5 minutes. Maybe if anybody has questions, comments, confessions, ideas, critical thoughts, disagreements, you can go.
Will you give your email, please?
My email repeated. Yeah, daniel@unreasonablegroup.com. But also unreasonableInstitute.org, unreasonable.is, unreasonablemedia.com. We have a lot of projects at Unreasonable. I didn't actually talk about everything we do because it's way too confusing. But it's all oriented around solving hard problems through entrepreneurship. Yeah?
Can you talk about mistakes or failures you have done?
Mistakes and failures? Yeah, I can talk all day about that. Yeah, we've had a lot of failures. Part of it is we're always failing. And we've had, to us, so yes, I'll answer that question very directly in a second, but we've changed our perspective or orientation to failure. How we define failure is not starting or stopping or doing something that's against your ethical brain. Everything else is necessary for success, right? So all those times you stumble and you put something out to market and it doesn't work, or you experiment in a way to accelerate the growth of a company or invest into a company and it doesn't work, those aren't failures in our mind, those are lessons learned and they're necessary. But we have had probably what most people would call failures. We've had a lot of them. The Unreasonable Institute actually came out of a failed organization. So when I was in undergrad, I launched a program called the Global Leadership Institute. It needed to have a more professional brand because I was in undergrad, so when I emailed people, I wanted them to take it seriously. And that program, we brought together 17 entrepreneurs from 14 countries. We put them in the same house for 6 weeks, and we tried to launch new companies to solve problems related to poverty. It's the exact same mission that the Unreasonable Institute has. And the program went really well. I ran it my senior year at university, but it failed because one of my teammates actually tried to sue me and one of the other co-founders. And what I learned is a lot. But what I learned is when you do business with friends, and especially with friends, in fact, I'd only recommend doing business with best friends, but you need to make certain you have a contract. We didn't have a contract. We just figured that we're all on the same page. We all have good intentions. We're all trying to solve problems related to poverty. And that ended up in a really big dispute. I actually had to shut down that organization. And I was really depressed. I had 2 weeks of basically, I would call it episodic depression. I didn't sleep, I didn't eat. Because I'd worked on this thing for 4 years and we were just trying to do good in our minds as a team. And I remember I was sitting in the dean of the business school at the University of Colorado. I live in Colorado. I was in his office, and I was in his office pretty often, not always for good reasons. But he's a serial entrepreneur. His name's Paul Journey. And I sat down with him. We're having a conversation. And I was just really sad, like actually sad. If anybody here has ever lost a company, it's really sad. You lose a piece of yourself. And I remember sitting there being pretty depressed. And Paul looked at me and he said, "What are you complaining about?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" I was like, "We spent 4 years trying to do this. I put a bunch of money into it. We just wanted to do good, and we lost it. And I don't even know why we've lost it." And he said, "No, I'm looking at the luckiest person I've seen in 2 months." I said, "Well, how could you say that, Paul? Like, everything's gone, right?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "You learned a very valuable lesson. It wasn't that expensive. You can get out of my office, you can do it again, you're going to do it better." He goes, "This was a lesson. This wasn't a failure." And so that's actually where we got our perspective on failure. But there's a lot of stories like that. Most all of our entrepreneurs have actually been sued at one point or another. It's just true. They didn't win in the case, but I don't know. Anyways, so that was definitely a failure because we lost that organization, but created a reasonable out of it. Is there another question? Maybe one more? Sure.
Thank you very much for your talk.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I have a question. How do you track the impact your companies at the Girl Effect Accelerator do?
How do we track the impact of our companies coming out of the Girl Effect Accelerator? Really good question. So we look at 6 metrics. that we track across all of our companies. We measure these quarterly. It's very simple numbers. It's growth or decline in revenue and costs and team size and customer acquisition and geographic expansion and financing. But those are just indicators of how fast the company is growing. Right? They're not indicators of how much impact they're having on girls living on less than $2 a day, which is our target. And all of the companies have a seventh metric, and that's individualized to their theory of change around girls and poverty. And we track that as well quarterly. So an exam have completely different metrics on how they look at their impact on girls. And we're still working with them on those metrics. We actually do a monthly call right now since the program in November. So we've done 7. And we're going to keep doing that through the end of this year, probably into actually next year as well, to really nail that metric that they measure that is the closest adjacency to their theory of change on girls. But it's different for every business. It's a great question. It's really hard. So I'll pause and give the mic back, and I think it's on to the next thing. Yeah, thank you all.